This is the first fireside chat for the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre for 2022. So thank you all very much for coming. Before we kick off, can I please ask that everyone just keeps their microphones on mute until we get to the Q&A section a little bit later. And I also want to let you know that this session is being recorded. So shoot us a DM if you've got any problems with that. My name is Sarah and I'm going to be hosting the chat today. I'm the Marketing, Communications and Events Manager here at MEC, and on behalf of our wonderful team, including the teams from MapTram and InnovatEd, thanks so much for coming along. The way today's session is going to work is that we'll have an interview with Mim and Rory for about 30-40 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for questions, taking us through roughly until about 50 minutes, 1:30 p.m. at a max. So before we kick off, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country where I'm speaking to you from today at Melbourne Connecting Carlton, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. I'd encourage you to pay respects to the traditional owners of the lands you're on, and particularly in the time that we're going through at the moment, really reflect on their continuing connection to land and particularly water with the floods happening in northern New South Wales. So our first two fireside chats for this year are titled Meet the Managers. They're a fantastic opportunity for us to dig a little deeper with the truly wonderful people who run the programs within MEC at MapTram and InnovatEd. Today, I'm joined by Rory McNeice, our Velocity Program Manager, very newly started, and Mim Ingvarson, Program Manager at InnovatEd. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Lovely to be here.
Lovely to meet you. It's the first time today.
No, lovely to be here.
Now, rather than introduce both of you, we're going to spend a little bit of time exploring your backgrounds and why you do what you do. But I wanted to kick off with a fun question. What's the most exciting thing you've learned or come across this week? Do you want to go first, Rory?
Oh, okay. I have a very good friend, and she is a marine ecologist and knows an awful lot of very interesting things about sea slugs. And she was telling me the other day that apparently there is a species of sea slug in Victoria that is known to sometimes, and for unknown reasons, jettison its own head from its body and regrow an entirely new body from its head.
And I just thought, amazing.
That's just fascinating. I mean, it's interesting because you see there are various lizards and things that can regrow a tail or a limb or whatever, but it's fascinating to see that there's something that can literally basically drop off everything below the neck, and then has the sufficient energy reserves somehow to be able to start regrowing an entirely new body.
I love that, Rory. I was thinking about that, and I think, something exciting that I've been around this week is a little bit like a metamorphosis. Every time a startup goes through a funding round, they kind of, have to change and grow. And I've just been around a startup that's doing a funding round, starting a funding round this week. And the thing that I was reflecting on is that it's such an emotional ride, and you can't really separate yourself from those emotions. There's the highs and the lows, even though you can logically say to yourself, this is what needs to happen. This is the process. I know it. I've seen it before. It's still one hell of an emotional ride.
Excellent. Well, while we're on that train, I mean, you've just been talking about the fact that you've sort of been through this roller coaster experience before. Do you want to give us a little bit of a 101 on your career? Who's Mim? Where have you come from? What do you do?
Well, I've been around for a little while, Sarah, so hopefully I don't take too long boring you with that. But so I initially I started at Melbourne Uni doing an arts degree, and then later a master's in teaching. And while I was studying, I supported my academic studies first as a stage manager, and then later on as an event site manager, and then also a production manager. So I love this work because it was always new events, redoing something, but in a new way. So some of those things I got to do was work at the Olympics, Fashion Week with the Australian Ballet. So a lot of fun. And at the same time, I started down an academic road in research around mental health, eating disorders, and the legal interventions that are involved. around that. So pretty different from where I am today. But what I loved about that work was that I got to talk to lots of different people and learn from their experiences and their preferences, which really set me up well for customer interviewing later on. And then as I grew my family, I focused my time around my younger children, and I got to work on some short-term projects, mainly around consumer experiences and government policy, and also started to do some work around education. And that's where I got my first taste for starting a new enterprise. So I was on the founding team to set up a government-supported program that sought to level the playing field for edtech businesses in Australia. And this was through the interoperability of data. So this program squarely started in response to a problem that one of the founders had been butting up against for some time. Small Aussie edtechs were struggling to connect and work with the larger education departments. So we convinced states and territory education departments to fund a new program and find a solution and fund that solution together. So this is where I got an early experience working with and growing community. I brought together competing edtech businesses who don't generally speak to one another, got them together and got them to discuss and agree what kind of data they might share and how they might share that. I did a similar project in the US. One that I think of when I think about this that was really interesting was for the Gates Foundation, and that was bringing together school districts. So sort of a bit of a theme here around community and getting people together. And that's the thing that I probably loved most in those jobs, and also the opportunity to solve new problems. So today there's still not a big number of women in edtech, nor in startups, and especially in edtech. So I feel like we really need to elevate each other as women and be proud of each other and lead by example. So one of the things that I got an opportunity to do was to lead the EdTech Women in New York, and that community, when I was there, I really got to learn and meet and be inspired by some people. So it feels like a pretty natural progression when I landed back in Melbourne to get to this current job, InnovatEd, and kick off the InnovatEd program.
Amazing. We'll jump back over to Rory and hear a little bit about him, but then I definitely want to hear more about InnovatEd. I'm sure everyone on the call does as well. Rory.
I don't think I'm anywhere near as interesting or exciting.
I'm sure you are.
Well, interesting to know, Mim, that you started out with an arts degree as well, because so did I. Once upon a time, I was enrolled in arts and engineering, and it turns out that maths and physics don't really agree with me. So I dropped the engineering component, which came after actually failing all of those subjects. I failed all of my engineering subjects in first semester of first year, and it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I was very much one of those who came all the way through school and say, oh yeah, go to uni, go and do engineering, go and do all these bits and pieces, and just was on a very clear path and trajectory. And I haven't really gotten very far, have I? No, I mean, in telling the story. And I think failing was just one of the most important things that happened to me, because it opened my eyes and made me stop and actually think about, well, what do I really want to be doing? So I continued with the arts degree and focused on political science and philosophy, because I find people interesting, fascinating, really just understanding how people operate, what really excites them and drives them. And so politics and philosophy are a natural mix there. Finished my arts degree and thought, I should probably have done something that would get me a job instead of political science and philosophy. So very sensibly, I went on to do a postgrad law degree, thinking this will be great. I like to argue, I'll be a great lawyer. Made it about halfway through that and realized, oh no, very, very few lawyers actually get to do the arguing part. Most of them are sitting there working on casework, and that's not really for me. So I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. What am I going to do? So for the second half of my law degree, I said, right, I'm going to pick topic areas that have broad applicability to be able to look elsewhere once I finish. And luckily for me, I focused on intellectual property, which I have very strong opinions about. So ask me about them sometime and I'll talk your ear off. But fortunately for me as well, when I was in the final year of my law degree, a good friend of mine who I'd known for many years was starting a business. So his startup was, at the time, it was called One-to-One Cast. And it was around the idea of building a personalized radio app. So, mixing together audio content in terms of music, news, traffic, weather, sport, all those different pieces into a custom app that you could program essentially for yourself. So you got the radio station you wanted. Unsurprisingly, there were a lot of questions around intellectual property. And he said, hey, Rory, do you reckon you could help us out with this? So I said, oh, yeah, I don't really know about much of this startup stuff, but why not? And that was the start of a very slippery slope. So I worked with One-to-One Cast for a number of years through a rebranding to Omni and Omni Studio. So through 2012 to 2014, I was there, and then continued to advise the CEO after I moved to London in 2014, and lived there for 2 years working with startups and small businesses on commercialization grant funding. Came back from London in late 2015, start of 2016, and stumbled across a role at the university based around research grant applications, because obviously working with a lot of startups and small businesses on commercialization grants and commercialization funding, I thought, well, it's transferable skills, it's basically using the legal skill set I've developed, why not? And through that, I actually ended up in a role as part of Carlton Connect, which was setting up the now Melbourne Connect Innovation Precinct where I'm sitting today. So it's kind of exciting to have been involved there, doing a lot of the events and activations as part of that prototype to build a really exciting community around innovation. And part of that was that we played host to MAP. So I suppose I should also mention that One-to-One Cast came through MAP in its first year in 2012. So yeah, I've been sort of alongside MAP for many, many years. Worked at the university for a couple of years as part of Carlton Connect and then in one of the corporate partnerships teams. And then in 2019, at the end of the year, my contract at the university was ending. I thought, you know what, I could get back into some of this startup stuff, but I might take the summer off. So March 2020 rolled around and I thought, this is a great job market. This is looking really good. Minor pandemic, everything's going a bit pear-shaped. What am I going to do? And very fortuitously for me, my friend was getting back into startups after One-to-One Cast. Omni was sold to a US advertising company in 2019. And he was getting interested in angel investing and how he, as someone who'd been a successful founder, could start to give back to the startup community. So I worked with him on Angel Partners and Startup Galaxy for most of 2019 and 2020. And then when the opportunity came up to join MAP as the Velocity Program Manager and work with early stage founders to help them build a lot of those fundamentals that they need to get their businesses off the ground, for me, it was a dream come true. It was an opportunity to apply all of these skills and knowledge that I've been building over the last 10 years to an area that I care about to help people follow in a similar path.
That's excellent. I think most of my friends try and drag me into things that are bad ideas. It seems like yours drag you into things that are good ideas, in particular startups.
Very lucky to have accidentally picked good friends.
Yeah, good job. Mim, how did you find your way into startup land?
So I guess different sort of smaller projects and similarly like Rory, being around folks that are really, passionate about starting new things. One startup that I sort of think about when I think about, what I've really, a great experience I really enjoyed was developing a literacy tool for middle school kids. And I think, having a problem that you're passionate about is a really important way, to be getting off the ground. And there's a real challenge today for young people to engage in long form reading. And by that, I mean sustained regular reading. For kids that like reading, it's not really a problem, but for the majority of kids, the technology kind of distracts, gets in the way. And we know that reading is is one thing that has a huge impact on students learning, longer term. So that was a really great opportunity, that startup, to develop a tool that encouraged reading, wrapped a social layer around the reading with book reviews and things like that. But what was really fun about that one was seeing how technology can support rather than support and extend rather than take over. That technology doesn't have to be the main thing and the only thing. It can have a role extending something else. So that tool, it was fun because it used something as simple as a barcode on the back of a book to get kids who like to, scan barcodes, engage with metadata and and give teachers, empower teachers with some information about what kids are doing with their reading. So I think that project really excited me because I learned so much about literacy, about classrooms, about running a dev team, sales cycles, and how business can, sometimes start as a business but end up better suited as a feature, in a larger sort of environment. I think it's probably one example that, really got me fired up.
Oh, excellent. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about InnovatEd for everyone out there who's really excited to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something I can go on and on about. InnovatEd, I just feel so incredibly fortunate to have got to, join InnovatEd and bring it to life. So InnovatEd has got one really big objective, which is to support staff, students and alumni to identify problems that they see in the teaching space, in the tertiary teaching space, and look at ways that they can solve those challenges using technology to enhance things. So it can be a really specific problem space. So keeping that in mind, we as a program work with a wide range of projects. So it can be people who are dipping their toes in the water, just sort of thinking, this isn't really, working in my class when I'm teaching. Students aren't grasping these concepts. They're really complex. How can I do it differently? Or it can be a situation where people have spent a lot of time thinking about how to solve a problem. They've got a really cool thing happening and they're looking for ways to expand that into other subjects in the university setting. So it's great to have lots of different people's perspectives involved in the program. And when I say that, I mean, students look at a problem quite differently to the way that a teacher might look at a problem. So it's a program that really wants to keep involved those different perspectives, staff, students and alumni. And, what's not a better place than a university to get to try out new ideas?
It's a fantastic test bed, and based on your experience, it's very easy to see why you're the absolute right person to be managing InnovatEd.
Thanks, Sarah.
Now, Rory, coming full circle from being a part of the MAP program with Omni Studio way back when to being the Velocity Manager this year, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Velocity program, first of all, but then second of all, what it's been like coming back almost 10 years later and how the program's evolved and changed?
Yeah, I can do that. So Velocity is a program that's targeted at very early stage founders that was set up, time blurs together a bit, but I think 6 years ago now, maybe around there, when it was sort of realized at MAP that we had this fantastic accelerator program, but that there was a gap at that earlier stage in the ecosystem and that there was not really much support for people who had sort of made it past that ideation stage and needed to learn about product market fit, customer validation and customer discovery, and a lot of those startup fundamentals to be able to get to the point where they sort of be well served by the accelerator program. So basically that's what Velocity does. It exists to take in a cohort of founders each year, put them into a group with other founders in roughly similar stages of company development, but from a lot of different areas, different fields and different backgrounds, to be able to see what kind of challenges others are facing, how they're solving them, and learn about how they can solve those for themselves when they encounter them, while also getting a lot of that really practical experience around how do you really understand that you're solving a problem for your customer, and what is it that you're helping them do that they really care about and bluntly that they want to pay money for. In terms of the history of the program, the best example I can give is probably if you look at the building that the program was based in back in its first year. It was the top floor of the old metallurgy building, where I'm pretty sure that there was a door that opened onto nothing, just like opened out the side of the building. And so we were sort of stuck away in the attic of an ancient building. So like, oh, whatever, they're doing something innovation related, so we'll just sort of chuck them up there and they'll be fine. Compared to now, where we're sitting here in this beautiful new innovation precinct that's being built at outrageous cost, but to try and encourage that sort of innovation activity around the university. And I think that's a pretty good summary of what the journey has been. Because when MAP was started, the university is a 150 plus year old institution. It doesn't really move quickly. It takes a long time for change to happen. And so it took a couple of people with a real passion for entrepreneurship and innovation. People like Charlie Day, Rory Workman, Taz, to really get such an idea off the ground. And for them, it was a real fight. It was a real scrappy startup in itself. And I would say that for a long time, because the university is a big, slow thing, which has its benefits, by the way, for a long time, the university hasn't really understood, what are we doing with innovation? Why do we do it? Is it just so that we look like we're cool and hip to the students? Are we just doing it so that they can say, yeah, then I can go and do a startup and I can go through that? Or what greater value is there in how this can be built out to understand the lessons that we can learn as a university from this innovation space and this entrepreneurial space, and expand that out across the rest of the university? And so back in, let me get this right, 2018 was when the Entrepreneurial Centre was formed. Is that right, Sarah?
Yep.
So in the years between 2012 and 2018, a couple of other innovative programs sprung up around MAP and around the university. And having had that time to see what MAP could do for startups, in the broader world, there are opportunities to create programs like TRAN, which is very much internally focused to help researchers and academics develop a lot of those entrepreneurial skills, to take their research from something that happens in a lab to something that builds a product or a service that people can use in the real world. And so I think the real change over the last 10 years has been the university, in its own way, gradually coming to understand the real value of innovation and really commit to supporting it. So that's why we have this fantastic new precinct where we're in here. There are fantastic partners in other parts of the building who we can work with, and opportunities to network and connect on the superfloor. And I think without programs like MAP and TRAN and InnovatEd, the university never would have realised the value in that and would still be carrying on doing business as usual. So yeah, I think it's been exciting to see how we have been able, as this sort of little, well, I say we, obviously I've been involved in different capacities over the years, but MAP has been able, as this very scrappy little part to begin with, to gradually start bringing about this really important cultural change at one of the leading academic institutions in the country.
Well, somewhere that's been embracing innovation and entrepreneurship for a very long time is the States. And Mim, you were lucky enough to live in New York and participate in an accelerated program over there. We'll start with the accelerated program. What was it about that was so special for you?
Look, New York is a pretty unique place. It's pretty, it's fair to say it's electric. And so getting to have the privilege to be in an accelerated program there where, life is intense in New York, and then you put in like a 12-week pressure cooker was really pretty amazing. I'd say what I think I learned from that was that everyone in New York City has a side hustle, and some people have 10 side hustles. And so that really helped me feel comfortable with having more than one thing on the go at the same time. And when knowing that when you meet someone, you may not necessarily find out everything about them the first time you meet them. So it's kind of opened some horizons for me. The program itself was really intensive. And really hyper competitive, and that helped me in an individual to kind of toughen up a little bit and learn some new skills and grow in some confidence. So I think that was a real privilege to get to do that. And then the other accelerated program that I got to go through was the Female Founders Alliance in Seattle, and that one was another really special opportunity because it championed women to have some opportunities that are harder to come by and harder fought, which is raising capital as a woman is statistically substantially harder. So this was a program, and still is running today, that gets women tooled up with the skills and knowledge to do that. And I think that's something in Australia we are still learning, and hopefully will continue to grow.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of things that we can learn from the overseas context. And I guess I'm really interested to know what's the difference like between the startup scene in America, particularly in New York, and what it's like in Melbourne.
I think it's volume, Sarah. You know, you live in a city like New York that has as many people in it as the country does, as Australia does, our country does. And so there is just more people to speak to and more people to compete against. But the volume piece allows you to iterate and bump and grow more easily, because you can talk to more people in a faster sort of fashion. I think probably one example that in that accelerated program that sort of highlights this was, it was called Mentor Madness. And for 2 weeks, all of the startups were told the night before who they would be pitching to. All of the pitching sessions, which were 30 minutes long, were filmed. So you knew you were being recorded and you knew that it might get used in the future. You didn't know who you were speaking to till the night before. So you had to iterate your pitch when you got the list of people you're going to speak to. And at the end of each of those pitches, you were given a score. And that score was publicly put up on a scoreboard. And so it was a competition within a competition. But, you know, it made me really think fast. It made me learn fast, and it made me improve my communication skills, and also start to feel comfortable, you know, just making mistakes and having another go. Because as soon as that one was finished, you went to the next room and did the next one. And so I think that sort of was a microcosm of what New York City is like in that volume aspect, that you just, you know, you do it, you get up and you do it again.
Excellent. And Rory, you lived in London, obviously. What's the experience like in Melbourne v London?
So I was just interested to hear what Mem was saying about her experience in the US, because I've visited many times but not actually lived there. And I definitely agree that it just feels a lot faster paced. There's a lot more sort of density of things going on. And I think there's a degree to which that was similar in my experience in London, which, you know, we're now talking, well, 2014 and 2015, so things may have changed in the interceding years. But my experience of London was similar in terms of that density being a real breeding ground for just new and interesting things happening. You know, it felt like you couldn't go 5 meters down the road without running into somebody who was trying out a startup, which was fantastic. Certainly from my experience, what I found very interesting and different over in the UK was that I encountered a lot more founders who were not so much pursuing the idea of, you know, I'm going to have a tech startup that's going to be a unicorn and I'm going to retire on a yacht by the time I'm 35, which is sadly a boat that I've already missed. But people who were more interested in building a sustainable business. So I remember, you know, one of the first people I met when I was over there was a guy who'd founded a data visualization company. And I remember, you know, being fascinated when I spoke to him in the first couple of weeks, and he was like, yeah, we've had a couple of venture capitalists interested in investing. We've told them no, we're not interested, because we'd rather retain control of our business at this stage and keep growing it the way that we want to grow it, rather than bring in some external money and grow as fast as possible. Because it's more important to us to grow, you know, responsibly and grow a sustainable business that will still be here in 10, 15 years' time, rather than something that might grow really quickly but then crash. And I thought that was like there were a lot of founders who were in that kind of a boat where they're like, yeah, I'm happy to build something that, you know, employs 10 to 15 people, you know, brings in enough money that everybody can live happy and comfortably, and doesn't have to be something that changes the entire world. And I thought that was, you know, a good and healthy sort of counterpoint to the idea of get as much money as you can, as quickly as you can, to grow as fast as you can, and try and absorb everything. So I think it's certainly, I found it a valuable experience in terms of giving me a different perspective on what it is to be a startup.
Mim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think that there's so many ways to skin a cat, and Rory's just given us, you know, another way to think about what is, you know, what is sustainable, or what does success look like. And it kind of links back to my thought of, you know, people have multiple things on the go. One of the things that in InnovatEd we really need to respect is that everybody that tends to be involved in the program has other, you know, often full-time academic careers or study loads that they're doing, and they're those need to be respected, as well as supporting them to do this edtech business or edtech idea that they want to give a go. So there's lots of different stages involved in what we do at the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre, and there's lots of different styles to go about that, and that's just part of what makes for a really vibrant and fun community to be part of.
Just picking up on what you were saying, Mim, about how everybody has sort of a life outside of entrepreneurship. I think that's been something that I've really taken to heart, I suppose, is to understand that everybody is coming to this journey differently. Everybody has a different background, different history, and they're to understand that everyone is a whole and complete person in themselves. It's not just they do that startup and that's it. And I think there's one of the things that I've seen so much value in is where people are able to look at all of those different skills and the different experience and different knowledge that they can bring to the startup ecosystem that may not look like something that's directly relevant, and yet are able to build on it, draw from it. My partner, she's a teacher. Oh, she was a teacher for 7-8 years, and has recently made the jump across into EdTech, and is applying a lot of the knowledge and skills that she developed, managing a classroom full of 12 to 14-year-olds in her career in education technology. All of those little opportunities to take some of those experiences that you had as a person and realize where they're valuable. I think it's interesting to see how you can sort of thread all these pieces together rather than trying to sort of take everything as separate.
Absolutely, Rory. And I think also that's one of the strengths of the longevity of the programs at Melbourne Uni is seeing people come back around, like yourself, who've been around the industry for a long time and are happy to come back and mentor, and that they bring a completely sometimes alternative skill set that someone new to a business may not yet have. And I know that you work to foster that in Velocity, bringing people in to support the programming, and we do it through the university with the expertise that we have at the university. InnovatEd is so fortunate to have access to really smart people across so many different areas of knowledge. So the university is particularly well placed. In some ways you think, is it a place for entrepreneurship? But on the other side, it's access to so many interesting people, I think is quite unique.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think this, my next question is one that I'm sure that you've both got so much to say about. What is it about startups that gets you ticking, and why do you love what you do?
Oh, okay. One word answer: tomorrow. The dreamer in me, I love to look at things and be like, well, what could this be in the future? Where can this go, and what can this do for people to make life better? I think, and I think a lot of ways that actually stems from my philosophy background. As an undergrad, you're sitting there looking at, you're reading texts written by people 3,000 years ago, asking questions about life that we're still asking today. And they had some really interesting solutions to those problems based on what they knew at the time, and developed these ways of thinking that we still use. And so, that I think is what opened my eyes to the understanding that the differences, sorry, not the differences, the changes that we can make today can have impacts that affect people not just here and now, but who are separate from us in time and space. So yes, around the world, but also in the world of 300 years from now. And I know this is a bit, a bit starry-eyed, but I don't know if Facebook is necessarily going to be something that's making the world better in 300 years, but that entrepreneurial mindset, I think, is something that drives people like Elon Musk, for better or worse, with things like Tesla and SpaceX, which are clearly built around this idea of what can that better future look like. So to me, I am drawn to it because I dream of that better future, and whatever I can do to help bring that, even if I'm not a founder, where I can support people to help bring that tomorrow closer to today, that's where I want to be.
I think we need a lot of that at the moment, Rory. It's a good answer. What about you, Mim?
Yeah, I think I would concur with a lot of what Rory's saying, and I think you've done a great job bringing that together. my passion is probably more, obviously towards the education realm of things. And, education's not something that people get into to be a unicorn, to make loads of money. It's certainly a mission-driven area of work. And I think EdTech, a couple of years ago, as I was starting out with InnovatEd, was a bit of a hard sell, to be honest, at the university. We're an old institution that's been delivering teaching and learning and assessment in a similar kind of format for a long time, and it's worked pretty well. But the pandemic has definitely made that a much easier pitch. And I think that, like I was saying before about that literacy tool, technology has the opportunity to extend and to support and to create some things like more inclusive environments and better forms of engagement. So I'm really excited to change and grow new things, and I think that alongside my desire to elevate education into the future kind of sits well for starting startups in that area.
Definitely, and I think particularly after the pandemic.
I'm going to jump in just because I think, Mim, you are probably in the most interesting space here, because to me, when I think about that tomorrow and the things that will be there in 200, 500 years time, there are two things that will last. There's stuff and there is knowledge. And fundamentally, stuff will become obsolete. Nobody's going to be using their MacBook Pro in 300 years. Or if they are, then society's in a real big trouble. But in terms of the knowledge, in terms of how we learn and how we help educate each other, that knowledge transfer through generations, through education, I think is one of the things that fundamentally makes humans human. And so I think it's a really exciting area to be in, to be able to look at how can we improve that and how do we develop that so that those people in the future get the opportunity to have a better life than we have. Sorry,
and that's up to the awesome participants in InnovatEd and folks that might like to in the future. Bit of a plug there.
Absolutely. And speaking of, future founders or people that are, in the process of kicking around an idea, it might be something that they sort of, something that irks them about work, that, that they know there's a problem that they'd like to solve, or maybe it's something that they've, talked to their friends about over a beer on a Friday night, or, maybe it's something that's come to you in the shower. What's your advice to people out there who are kicking around an idea and just aren't sure what to do with it?
My advice would be talk to the people who will use it, or the people who you think might pay for it. Really, and that's not your best friend who comes under that banner. It's because, my best friend, she tells me what I want to hear. She's super supportive, but I think that you want to start to ask the people who you haven't met you before, but fit that idea of who you think might want to use it. And who better yet might want to pay for it, because ultimately for something to last, there's got to be somebody who's going to help you with the financial side of it and pay for it. And once you can see that there's a place for it, then you can get about sort of working out exactly what it might look like. But lots of conversations and lots of questions of those folks. That would be probably my first tip.
I'd agree with that entirely. Find the person that's hurting and figure out how to help them. But I think the other thing that I'd add to that, which is sort of flavored by my background in intellectual property, is don't be afraid to talk to people about the idea. The number of times that I've come across founders or startups who say, oh, but I need you to sign an NDA before we can even discuss what the idea is. It's just an idea at that stage, right? Ideas come and go. I mean, for almost every idea that you have that you think is original, I guarantee there's 10 other people out there who've had the same idea. It's not really worth going through the hassle to try and prevent people from talking about it, because what you really want in those early stages is to find the right people to talk to, and the way to do that is to share what you're doing and why you're doing it, to help you discover other people who have the skills and passion to be able to support it. And you're never going to find them if you're saying, oh, can you please sign my NDA? So I suppose my advice would be, speak to as many people as you can about it. And, don't worry about them trying to steal your idea, because, remember, as you were saying about everybody in New York who's got 10 side hustles of their own, everybody's too busy to steal your idea. They're too busy working on how are they going to get their idea out the door. So, speak to anyone and everyone that you can, and definitely focus on those people who are directly affected by the problem. But just reach out to people. You never know where you're going to find someone who has an interesting connection or experience that will be able to contribute and help.
And we've just obviously closed off applications for the first round of Map Velocity for this year. But a question that often comes up prior to people submitting their applications is thinking about what fundamentals would you say that people need to have in place before they go looking for a pre-accelerator program? And, are there any fundamentals you need to have in place?
Ooh, it depends. Is really
Good answer.
the right answer. That's the law degree in me coming out, because every founder and every startup is different, and so there's not really a single standard point of entry to a pre-accelerator program, as far as I'm concerned. Broadly speaking, within Velocity, through the applications that we get, it sort of falls into sort of one of two buckets. Either they're people who have sort of stumbled across something that's starting to work and want to sort of build a foundation under themselves so that they make sure that they don't stumble with what they've already caught. Or people who sort of found an idea and said, I really think there's something in this area, but I don't really know how to go about it, and would like to build the fundamentals in order to pursue that idea. So that's a wide range. That's from, I have an idea, I've spoken to some people, but I don't even have a product yet, through to, you may already have a product and have a couple of early sales. So you can be sort of anywhere in that spectrum, as far as I'm concerned, for a pre-accelerated program. But I think the key thing is to really have an understanding, or at least an idea of who are you trying to help and why, and what are you trying to help them do. I think that's really the core of it, because that helps define everything else. And, of course, through a program like Velocity, what we do is we basically take people through how do you really make sure that that idea that you have about who needs help is right, and how do you really understand what the problem you're solving for people is. So, but having that sort of the core part of the idea of, here's roughly where I want to play, this is the space I'm interested in, this is where I think I can make a difference, I think is really the only fundamental that you need for a pre-accelerator.
What's your take?
Well, InnovatEd is slightly different in that we are not so involved in the commercial aspect of projects. And I guess I call them projects because, they can have be more of a business entity, or they might actually not themselves, the people involved when they come to InnovatEd, really expect it to grow out as a commercial enterprise that they're involved in. So I think for folks that are interested in exploring a problem that they've identified, the thing that I would say is there is so much research that you can do at home in the evening on your computer to learn about what other people are doing in the space and to learn about the problem that you're trying to solve. So I would say, just keep digging away at it. Don't sort of just go down a tunnel and forget to keep looking around you, because as Rory pointed out, there are other people looking at similar spaces, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all. It can actually mean you're heading in the right direction, but just keep asking yourself those questions, and so therefore you'll keep kind of redefining and developing your idea. So, we work with people that are really at the very beginning stage, all the way through, as I said before, all the way through to having already started to build a solution.
Excellent. Well, that brings me to the end of all of my questions, but I'm sure there are some lovely people in the audience today that have got some questions for you. So if you're keen to ask a question of either Rory or Mim, feel free to pop them in the chat box and we will ask away. Does anyone have any burning questions?
While we're waiting, I'll just echo, Mim, what you were saying about going out and just finding what you can. There's so much good content just on YouTube. There are some fantastic entrepreneurship and innovation courses that are available for free that I think both Harvard and Stanford have some really good content out on YouTube or somewhere online. If you search around and find it, just start watching through some of those if you're looking for a place to start, because they're genuine experts in the field. And I said I did a short course at Stanford, and one of the most excellent educational experiences of my life, in terms of just how well they can present that content and how much you can learn from it. So yeah, definitely dig around online and see what you can find.
Great advice. I do have one that's come through via DMs. For Mim, why do you think the university started an EdTech incubator program?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. InnovatEd is the first EdTech program in Australia, particularly in the tertiary setting. So the uni was pretty, in a way, innovative to kick it off. But I guess the simplest answer for that is, what not better place, to have an EdTech incubator. There's 6,000 staff, there's tens of thousands of students here, so many different areas of content that people are learning across, and different styles happening in the terms of the way that the teaching is delivered, and even more so since COVID. So it's the perfect testbed environment to test out ideas and really have the opportunity to see if they work. Because if they work here at Melbourne Uni, it's highly likely that they will have applicability at other tertiary institutions, and there's many of those in Australia, let alone internationally.
Excellent. And May, our friend from the Wade Institute, has just posted about studying entrepreneurship at the university, which is another fantastic option if you're not at the stage that you've got an idea and you're ready to apply for a program. They run the university's Master of Entrepreneurship program, so make sure you jump on that link and check it out if you're interested. Abby has also asked, what did you both originally think you would do as a career? I love that question.
I don't really know if I knew. And I think that's why I ended up, where I did and how I did, is because for me, it was a case of, I thought that if I sort of followed, I did maths and physics and stuff all through high school. I figured if I go and do that at university, by the time I get through my university degree, I'll know what I want to do. And, it turns out the answer was no, I still didn't know what I want to do. I mean, there are still times where I think, what am I going to do when I grow up? And I think that growing up might be a little way down the line for me yet. But for me, I don't think I ever had a clear, this is exactly what I want to be doing and this is where I want to go. So I'm probably not the best person to answer the question to. But,
what about you, Mim?
Yeah, it's a good career advice question. Look, I think one thing I was really clear on was that I wanted to work in ways that helped people. Might sound a little bit cliched, but I definitely knew that I wanted to do something that had kind of a purpose behind it. So I was pretty open to what that would involve. And I think that one of the great things about careers today is that you can, keep growing and changing, and things aren't quite as fixed as perhaps they were, a few generations ago. So, if you've got some core ideas about what gets you out of bed, like what drives you, that can help shape where you go. And I think, when we were talking about my career earlier, I really found that community and developing community was something that I really loved. Now that can take so many different formats. And, I've been fortunate to get to try that out in a few different spaces. I don't know that I would have predicted that starting new things was something that I would enjoy as much as I do, because, that wasn't something I did so much in high school. But yeah, definitely that mission-driven approach was probably my career driver.
Great. We've had a question from Bonnie, who's asked, what is something you do in your role that may be a surprise or unexpected to people?
I do everything in my role. It's like any good startup. I do the marketing, I do the events, I do the, the budget, I do the real, the uncool kind of stuff, like all the admin and emails and all, newsletters and stuff like that. So that's one of the things I love about InnovatEd. It's kind of like a startup in itself. And it needs to keep iterating and changing and finding out what's working for those that are participating in the program, and most importantly, what's not working as well. So I think one of the things I try to do is keep asking questions of those that are involved and learning, and always making sure that the people who are the stakeholders, the people who are funding the program, are happy with what we're doing and prepared to keep it going.
Unexpected. So I mean, I definitely echo what you were saying, Mim, about the being in this entrepreneurial space. You get used to kind of doing a bit of everything, and I don't know if it's quite unexpected, but I think something that I really enjoy that's not necessarily explicitly in my job description is actually getting to know people all over different parts of the university and just keeping on whispering in their ears about innovation and entrepreneurship, and getting to show them some of the cool things that we're working on here, and to try and help people who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to it, to get to see what we're doing and see where it could be valuable to them. So I think that sort of gradual outreach to, I mean, obviously, as you said, 6,000 staff at the university. There's a lot of them who are, yes, stereotyping, a lot of them who are academics, basically stuck in a lab most of the time. And a lot of professional staff as well who are working a 9-to-5 office job. And that's fine. That's great. You'd love to have them on board because they're all excellent people. What I really enjoy is being able to sort of sneak in from time to time and say, look, these exciting things that we're doing, you're helping this happen through what you're doing, and here's how you can get involved and enjoy some of this as well.
I love that. Question from Abby. Are either of you working on a side hustle at the moment? And if so, what, if you're prepared to share?
So I'm not. Well, as in I don't have anything that is my actual side hustle. But I think that's in part because over my time in the startup ecosystem, I've sort of realized that I'm not a founder. I'm not the kind of person who is the driving force behind a whole idea and makes the whole thing happen themselves, which is, not all founders are like that, but a lot are. And I think for me, I find that I naturally fit better into sort of like a number two or a supporting role. And I think that's why I love being part of the Velocity program so much, is it's an opportunity to support so many more people through a program where we get to help them get their businesses off the ground. So I continue to advise various people who I'm engaged with historically. I suppose the closest you could say is actually I'm part of, I do some volunteer work for a not-for-profit legal service that works on issues around residential tenancy, and they're fantastic, and I really enjoy working with them. Annika Legal, highly recommend them. If you're facing any issues around rental tenancies like bonds or evictions or rental repairs, just as a quiet plug there. But
good to know.
Because interestingly, they're a startup that came out of a hackathon.
Oh wow.
That's great, Rory. Yeah, I really like that. And I think that, those kinds of side hustles are super important, and great that you're keeping those legal skills going. I'm actually just in the kind of stage where there's a few ideas ticking around, and it's lots of chats and conversations. I don't think I can give you the 30-second spiel on it right now, but it is in that kind of realm of wanting to see how we can support EdTech in Australia to flourish a bit more. Yeah.
Awesome. We've got a couple more questions to round us out. I've got one from Kenny. It is a big question. Kenny's from a program background as well, and she's curious about program design. Can you share how both of your programs were designed, who gets involved in that process, how often it gets reviewed, and if you've got any specific learnings from that you might like to share?
Look, I think probably the briefest answer for InnovatEd is because I was fortunate enough to get to start from the beginning with the program. One of the things that I was encouraged to do was to think non-traditionally about the way that the program would operate. And so InnovatEd program design, I really got to have some hands-on kind of involvement in how we did it. And one of the unique parts of the incubator program is that we're a milestone-based program. So we work with projects at the beginning when they've been told, yay, you can be involved, and we'll give you a little bit of money and we'll give you some in-kind support. Over the next year, we sit down together and we work out what do they want to try and achieve over that year. And then my job is really as a lackey to get as much support and as much action happening towards those milestones. And that's a little bit different to the traditional, you've got your money at the beginning and it's up to you. Now we're sort of iterating that process as we go along, but I think that when you look at a program, it's always good to try to think about, what can we do differently? And in terms of review, look, that's at the moment for InnovatEd, that's a 3-year process, and that's internally within the university. And there's quite a reasonable set of important people that I need to report what's happened so far and make some informed projections about what I think are the opportunities going forward.
See, what about velocity?
I'm at almost the other end of the spectrum from Min, because obviously having just joined MAP at the start of the year, I've essentially inherited a program, which is being done a certain way for a number of years. So there's an extent to which actually stepping into the role, I am reviewing it. I'm sort of going through the process now, and as I am delivering what is probably 70-80% just carried on from what has been done previously, I'm already taking the approach of how can I take some of the knowledge and experience I have to help try and shape what this is for the better. So what can I do from experience in the startup ecosystem to try and use more of those small groups and small clusters, which I think are a really great way to do things in order to build rapport and support, rather than just me sit here and talk for 3 hours every Thursday night. Try and build a lot more of that interactivity into it. So a lot of that is already there. For me, it's a matter of testing that, and basically through this first cohort, being perfectly honest, it's a work in progress for me. There's a lot that I'm trying in the first couple of sessions that I'll see if I want to stick with it, or I will iterate as we go. I'm very fortunate to be in the position where there are people that I know around the university who I've worked with in previous roles delivering similar programs, and people like Nim, of course, who I can go to and speak to about how she's delivering things, to look at what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how to try and do it better. And I think one of the great advantages of being attached to such a fantastic academic institution is that we have experts in how to teach and how to learn. And so being able to go and speak to some of them and understand how we can apply some of the knowledge that's been developed through academic research into the way that we deliver these programs. So making it sort of a lot more, I don't know if symbiotic's the word I want, but creating that opportunity where we can apply that academic knowledge, but then also use it in a way that helps some of our academics, test and refine some of their own theories as well.
I think you got the right word there, don't worry. We do have another question from Mitch in the chat, but that's actually one that might be worth an office hours conversation with you, Rory, for sure. We are sort of at the end of our time today. So just in answering to Zara's question, Lakshmi is the program manager for the Melbourne Accelerator program, and Rory is the program manager for the MAP Velocity program. So the accelerator is still in place. Applications for that are going to open on the 25th of March, I believe. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
I certainly wouldn't think that I would replace Lakshmi. Irreplaceable.
No, we'd be very sad. We'd be making a bit of fanfare about it if she did leave. That is all we have got time for today. So thank you all so much for coming. A huge thank you to Rory and Nim for jumping on and having a chin wag. It has been so fantastic to learn more about both of you and about your journeys. If you're keen to come to our next fireside chat, my lovely colleague Abby McNeice, who's on the call today, is going to be interviewing MAP's Program Manager Lakshmi, and TRAMS Program Manager Andrew Rouse. That's on April 27th. We're going to be sharing the details for that soon. To stay in touch, make sure you sign up to our newsletters and follow MAP and TRAM on social media. Make sure you check out our upcoming Melbourne Design Week masterclass as well. May has also shared some details for the University Startup Pitch Competition if you're keen to apply for that. But with that, that's all we've got time for. Catch you later, alligators. See ya. Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Sarah.